The government stands to make over $1.7 billion from waste charging scheme. Fatal accident in hospital related to failure to input doctor's instructions. And over 108 seekers in Gaza are killed in Israeli attack. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. After Financial Secretary Paul Chan delivered the budget on Wednesday, government bureaus have been explaining key policies and measures to the public. Paul Chan announced that the waste charging scheme, which starts in August, will bring $1.79 billion to the Treasury. Secretary for Environment and Ecology Tse Chin-wen today stressed the purpose of the scheme is not to increase government revenue. Memo Sang-ai reports.
In his budget address, Financial Secretary Paul Chan said the upcoming implementation of the waste charging scheme will bring $1.79 billion to the Treasury. The government had earlier said it will spend between $800 million and $1 billion in promoting the waste charging scheme, adding the cost of promoting waste recycling and the government revenue received from the scheme will be roughly the same. However, the latest prediction of $1.79 billion are at least 80% higher than the previous estimation.
The government has conducted a survey about the residential and the commercial sectors usage of the designated bags, and estimated about half of the population will use designated bags. That is not too optimistic nor pessimistic. And the government has pledged before that the purpose of waste charging is not to generate revenue by itself.
They added the government has already spent $900 million in waste reduction and promotion of waste recycling.
As for the money that we've used in the past financial year, we have used the money on promoting recycling of plastic waste. We've also promoted the collection of food waste, as well as collection of paper waste.
On Wednesday, the government also announced the first registration tax concessions for electric cars will be extended by 2 years, but with a 40% reduction starting from April. The Environment Secretary said such a policy is not unique to the city and will not decrease the appetite of residents for buying electric vehicles, as they will be able to save a lot of money in fuel costs. News 9, TVB News.
To attract more tourists to the city, the budget has proposed holding monthly fireworks and drone shows. In a press conference today, Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism Kevin Yeung said they will be complemented by a range of retail, hospitality and catering services, as well as festivals for visitors to have a fuller Hong Kong experience. Starting in the second quarter of this year, Victoria Harbour will stage a monthly pyrotechnic and drone show. But there are concerns these spectacles, some costing $1 million per show, might not be enough to entice tourists to the city. Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism Kevin Yeung said the nighttime shows will help attract overnight tourists instead of just day trippers.
It will be combined with other tourist attractions like other major activities, as well as at certain festival seasons, so that when tourists come, they have a fuller experience of Hong Kong. And that will, of course, in the long term, bring economic benefits to Hong Kong.
The Tourism Board added the shows can enhance the city's night vibes.
Travel tourism and also dining sectors, there are more to offer in the evening. So I think they would also need to put in their effort. So I think that is a coordinated effort for everyone.
As to whether the 3% hotel accommodation tax that's set to take effect January 1st next year runs counter to measures to boost tourism, Kevin Yeung said it won't dampen travelers' interest in Hong Kong. That's because the tax only accounts for around 1% of their expenses in Hong Kong, Yeung said. In the same press conference, Under Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development Bernard Chan said more effort will be dedicated to building Hong Kong's trade network in the Middle East. Just as Financial Secretary Paul Chan earlier revealed, the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau today said the government is considering establishing the economic and trade offices in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia and Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, as well as setting up consultant offices in Egypt and Turkey. An 89-year-old patient at United Christian Hospital died allegedly after choking on his own vomit. Following investigations, the hospital discovered a nurse's oversight in the electronic record protocol after the nurse failed to input the doctor's instructions to check on the patient's vital signs regularly. The 89-year-old patient had multiple chronic illnesses, including diabetes. He was admitted to the emergency ward last month after running a fever and vomiting. The next day, the patient was transferred to the emergency ward in the internal medicine department. When his vital signs were checked, his condition was stable and remained so when nurses injected antibiotics and helped him take oral medicine from the afternoon to the evening. At 5 a.m., the patient was conscious when a ward assistant helped him turn over. After around half an hour, however, the patient stopped breathing and had no pulse, a nurse found while doing her ward round. There was vomit next to his bed. The patient was certified dead after resuscitation attempts failed. Initial investigation suggests he might have choked to death on his vomit. More probes from the hospital later found a nurse failed to follow a doctor's instruction to input the man's vital signs into a system, including blood pressure that should be checked every 4 hours. The registered nurse in question has more than 10 years' experience and is now on leave.
For this single point that the nurse actually have not entered into the system, probably because of the busy work, the nurse have to deal with several jobs together, and maybe we can really say this is she just forget to do this job.
The hospital added there are multiple signs to gauge the patient's condition, including his reactions and blood test reports. Having apologized to the family of the deceased, the hospital believes not inputting the records is not directly linked to the patient's death. But it admits the incident is not ideal and will establish an investigative committee to find out the cause of the procedural lapses and ways to improve the situation. Aid agencies have called for an independent investigation after at least 112 aid seekers were killed when Israeli troops fired on a large crowd of Palestinians at an aid convoy in Gaza City. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry said the Israeli army committed a massacre. Israelis said they did so after the crowd approached in a threatening way. This report from NBC News.
Bodies carried away on donkey carts after a deadly encounter while Palestinians gathered to receive humanitarian aid. But how it happened is in dispute. Our camera crew was there before 4 a.m. as hundreds of people came to the Gaza coast, waiting desperately for the delivery of food. Israel's military saying this drone footage was taken soon after, showing a crowd surging around aid trucks. A Palestinian eyewitness tells NBC News Israeli forces started firing at people gathering in front of a checkpoint before the trucks arrived and kept shooting later as the crowd rushed towards the aid. The Hamas-run health ministry says more than 100 people were killed, hospitals flooded with gunshot victims. But Israel's military saying many died not from Israeli bullets, but in a stampede around the trucks, and that Israeli troops only opened fire later at a specific group threatening their position. Do you have any evidence to support your claim that this crowd posed a threat to Israeli troops?
If you approach armed soldiers in a war zone and there is a threat and they fire warning shots in the air, the best thing to do is to turn around and walk away.
And tonight, the UN warning that 1 in 4 Gazans are just a step away from famine. Musa is 6 months old, barely older than this war, but in his tiny body, signs of a short life with little food. In a sense, he's lucky. Doctors say 8 other children died this week from malnutrition and dehydration, all at this one hospital. Not far away, Samia El-Masri trying to feed her kids by frying pancakes out of barley feed meant for donkeys. Her children dodging bullets to find firewood. Words can't describe the tragedy we're living in, she says.
Israel's latest attack has been condemned by United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, as well as by countries such as Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan. U.S. President Joe Biden now says a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel by Monday is unlikely. The White House called it a tragic incident.
We have been in touch with the Israeli government since early this morning and understand that an investigation is underway. We will be monitoring that investigation closely and pressing for answers. 2 things are clear. One, just from the aerial footage, you can look at that and right away conclude the situation is incredibly desperate, that people are swarming these trucks because they're hungry, because they need food, because they need medicine and other assistance.
In South Korea, the showdown continues between striking junior doctors and authorities over objections to an increase in the number of new medical students. Most junior doctors defied Thursday's deadline to return to work or face legal repercussions. And today is South Korea's Independence Day. President Yoon Suk-yeol delivered a televised speech in which he vowed to focus on building better partnerships with Japan and achieve a unified Korean peninsula. Tracy Furness has more.
At a ceremony in Seoul to commemorate Independence Movement Day, President Yoon Suk-yeol acknowledged a dark past between South Korea and Japan, but the country is looking to better partnerships with its neighbor.
한일 양국은
Yoon said South Korea and Japan are marching towards a new world as they overcome their painful past. Yoon added the two countries share values such as freedom, human rights and law, and they have become partners that work together for peace and stability in the world. But he also condemned North Korea, calling out its totalitarian system and repressive rule. Yoon vowed to achieve a free, unified Korean peninsula. He said Seoul's efforts to achieve unification must become a beacon of hope for North Korean people. Meanwhile, thousands of striking medical interns and doctors defied a government plea to return to work by Thursday or risk legal repercussions, such as suspension of medical licenses and prosecution. Only 294 out of more than 9,000 striking doctors have returned to work. The junior doctors have been on strike for about 10 days, protesting the government's push to boost medical school enrollments. The Korean Doctors Association marched last Sunday in front of the presidential office, vowing to resist to the end. Observers say strikers are likely to continue the work boycott for weeks or months. The government is expected to begin formal steps towards penalties on Monday, as Friday is a national holiday. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
And still ahead, Hong Kong Airport is hiring 3,000 local staff. Major mobile payment platforms in mainland China will raise single transaction limit for foreign visitors. And over 1 billion people globally are considered overweight. Welcome back. Financial Secretary Paul Chan said the government is committed to carrying on with the Kao Yi Chau Artificial Islands project, even though its rollout will be delayed. With a price tag of $580 billion, the government's Kao Yi Chau Artificial Islands project was proposed by the previous administration. Reclamation work was originally slated to begin in late 2025, but the timeline is set to be delayed given more than $1,000 billion of budget deficits. Speaking on a phone-in radio program today, Financial Secretary Paul Chan explained the pushback.
How to put this forward, including private investments or subcontracting the whole project to private consortiums. That is an idea. If we are going to go down that route, it may not cost that much in terms of government spending. But on the other hand, we want to have certain control over the land supply, say, for example, in this new created area.
A caller also expressed concerns the budget did not help the middle class.
A lot of people do two jobs. One is the formal morning job, and then they start a small business. It's very, very tough now.
When we are in a better position, we could look into how we can do more to assist the middle class.
When asked if the newly proposed two-tier standard tax regime targeting high-income earners will affect Hong Kong's reputation of having a stable tax system, Paul Chan defended the move.
We are still the most competitive in the regions. And the education for children, which is excellent, and the convenient access to the mainland, which is also offering huge career opportunities for people.
2 days after the removal of residential property cooling measures, transactions saw a sharp rise, with New World Development CEO Adrian Chang expecting a 40 to 50% rise in transactions this year. Chang reiterates property curbs will be reintroduced if the market runs out of hand. At least 880 imported airport workers have arrived in the city through the government's labor importation scheme. Another 1,000 workers are waiting for their visas. But the airport authority also needs a lot of local staff, and today organized a career fair. More than 40 companies and institutions offered over 3,000 vacancies in areas such as freight logistics. The airport authority said they now have nearly 60,000 employees, which has almost reached a pre-pandemic level of 73,000. The AA said the airport's traffic flow was at 80% of pre-pandemic levels, but during the recent long holidays, the manpower shortage situation did not affect the service it provided. China's central bank announced major mobile payment platforms will raise the single transaction limit for foreign visitors from $1,000 to $5,000. The People's Bank of China said foreigners sometimes face difficulties when paying in the country, as overseas credit cards cannot be linked to mobile payment platforms such as Alipay. The central bank decided to make it easier for foreign visitors to pay by introducing a series of measures. One of the adjustments is the single transaction limit for foreigners on mobile payment platforms will be increased from $1,000 to $5,000. The transaction limit within 1 year has been increased from $10,000 to $50,000. President Joe Biden and his predecessor Donald Trump both visited the border with Mexico in what U.S. media dubbed a split-screen moment. Both have struggled to contain the influx of migrants from the south. David Garrett reports.
Under grey skies, a political storm over immigration.
Nice weather, beautiful day, but a very dangerous border.
Donald Trump spoke to supporters in Texas, telling them he'd take care of it. Both Trump and Joe Biden descended on the southern state to highlight how they'll fix the flood of migrants. Hundreds are crossing, or thousands are waiting to try. Some succeed legally or otherwise in getting into America. The Rio Grande River is a potential entry point. The red line and barbed wire, a signal from US authorities to keep out. Filmed from the Mexican side, this makeshift campsite once housed 1,500 hopefuls aiming to get the required documents to live and work in the US. But many gave up waiting and tried to cross illegally. This 21-year-old refugee from Nicaragua has been on the road for 6 months. Aid worker Gladys Edith Aguilar says it takes 6 months just to get an appointment. They want to enter the US in a legal way, she says. Critics of the US system say it is this inefficiency which forces illegal crossings. It's a big problem for Joe Biden in this election year. A poll in January found voters believe Trump is better at securing the frontier by a margin of 2 to 1. Biden has blamed Republicans for blocking a bill. The president told border guards he'll get them more resources.
Join me, or I'll join you, in telling the Congress to pass this bipartisan border security bill. We can do it together. So instead of playing politics with the issue, why don't we just get together and get it done?
This is a Biden invasion. It's allowing thousands and thousands of people to come in from China, Iran, Yemen, the Congo, Syria, and a lot of other nations. Many nations are not very friendly to us.
Trump spoke to those on the front line as well as victims of crimes carried out by migrants. David Garrett, TVB News.
A new transnational analysis from leading health journal The Lancet and the World Health Organization has suggested the prevalence of obesity is accelerating at a staggering pace globally. Daniel Rao tells us more.
More than 1 billion people globally are now considered obese, a condition linked to an increased risk of serious health problems, according to updated estimates from the World Health Organization and an international group of researchers. The updates are the first from the team since 2017 and were compiled by more than 1,500 scientists in the Non-Communicable Disease Risk Factor Collaboration. At that point, around 774 million people above the age of 5 were estimated to be living with obesity, a similar proportion, around 1 in 8 people, as the new figures. The paper said obesity rates for adults more than doubled between 1990 and 2022, and more than quadrupled among children and adolescents aged 5 to 19. Over the same period, the proportion of girls, boys and adults considered underweight fell by a fifth, a third and half respectively. The findings, considered among the most authoritative of independent estimates, are based on data from more than 220 million people in more than 190 countries. While being underweight is becoming less common globally, in many countries it remains a significant issue, leaving increasing numbers of nations facing what is known as the double burden of malnutrition. Majid Izzati, senior author of the paper published in The Lancet and a professor at Imperial College London, said a staggering number of people are now living with obesity. Izzati said countries with the highest combined rates of underweight and obesity in 2022 were island nations in the Pacific and the Caribbean, and countries in the Middle East and North Africa. He stressed the need to take action to combat the trend.
The pace of it is shocking, and it really means that both those macro policies of poverty and cost of food and the very specific actions like school meals and targeted healthy food assistance should really be a priority, a major priority.
World Health Organization Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said implementing measures such as taxes on high sugar products and promoting healthy school meals were needed to help tackle obesity rates. Dan Roll, TV News.
And that's the news. Thank you for watching.